So now we're going to start on a different project. You guys have watched me build these batteries enough that I don't feel that we really need to worry about it. How we build it. The number one question I get with is charging. Well, as you can see, we're sitting at 14 point something volts, and we're just going to ramp this up to its max. Let's see here. So we got an RSP 1500-15. It's variable up to about 17.5 volts. Well, right now it's putting 88 amps worth of charge into these batteries. There's two batteries there. There's two banks of 6. Battery A, battery B. The chemistry of this battery lends itself to some amazing phenomenons. Amazing in the sense that it can handle as much current as you can possibly give it as a charge. And it'll also let go of as much current as you can put upon it as a load. The resistance of the battery is such that it is lower than the resistance of, let's say, a power supply. So the confusion lies in the realm of charging. Your stock alternator in your vehicle will charge a lithium battery just fine. But there are some things that you have to be made aware of. We're putting almost 100 amps worth of current into the battery, and look at how slowly that voltage is coming up. This freaking thing is a sponge. We're going to be here a while. We're going to charge this to 16 volts and then we'll shut it down. If you choose to use a stock alternator to charge your electrical system or charge your lithium battery in your vehicle, understand the fact that if you have this battery in your vehicle and you choose to run it down to very depleted 13.5, 12.5 volts, you also have to understand in your mind that if you let your vehicle run at an idle to charge this battery, it will overheat your alternator and cause it to burn up. But if you sit there in your vehicle after you have your battery completely depleted down to the 12.5 volt range, if you simply just run the throttle up from 500 idle RPMs to 1,000 RPMs, you'll be fine. All alternators are cooled the same way. Some alternators have the plate externally, some of them have them internally, but there's a plate that spins. It's got little fins on it. The fins move, create a low pressure, and they either push or pull air through the enclosure of the alternator to cool it. Alternators are horribly inefficient. They can only produce, let's say you have a 200 amp alternator on your truck. It's producing 200 amps worth of DC power, but it's also creating 200 amps worth of heat. At idle, alternators, most of them, cannot adequately cool themselves with this particular battery bank attached to it if the battery bank is very heavily depleted. Now, I want to show you what happens when we get towards the top end of the charge cycle. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's unplug. Holy moly, oh moly, that little 110 plug is hot. I'm sure the positive and negative wire, yep, they're hot too. We've just pulled a solid 100 amps through this thing for however long I've been talking. I want to show you something. This is really neat. And this is the reason that we can get away with using stock alternators to charge our systems or charge our lithium banks. But it's all in how you run it. So now what we've done is we've disconnected the power supply and we had our voltage set at 17.76. Well, it was going to push 17.5 volts until one of two things happened. The power supply exploded the battery explode, or we popped a breaker. So let's dial this into something that's a little bit more sensible, so I can show you what our cutoff voltage is. Okay, so we're going to set this at 15.82. Well, instead of us pushing to 17 volts, we're already right below that 15.82 voltage. Okay, charging up the capacitors inside the power supply. It might be time to redo my power wires coming off the power supply and my 110 plug, and I've had the same charger, or the same power supply now for yet a decade. I've used it to jumpstart multiple vehicles. It's the shop hussy. It gets around, right? Okay. Let's make sure everything is good and tight. Good and tight, they say. 14.85. Go ahead and we'll turn this all the way off. Bring it back up to DC. We'll turn the light on so you guys can enjoy it. We're going to zero it. And let's plug it back in. Now we're pushing 88 amps per hour, right? Let's watch what happens when we get closer to the 15.82 and our amp draw. So like I was saying, if your alternator is a 200 amp alternator and you decide that you're going to run your battery down to where it's really heavily depleted, and watch, look at our current drop. As our voltage increases, same phenomenon will take place in your vehicle. If you fully deplete the battery down to like 12.5, your alternator's in there screaming underneath the hood. So how you compensate for that is you simply stand on the throttle the first couple minutes that you're charging your battery up and give your alternator and give the battery a chance to get recharged and get full of energy. We set the power supply at 15.82. Now let's look at the amount of current. It is dropping. We're not changing anything. But this is the coolest bit of it. Let's say you have your voltage on your alternator set at 15 volts. In this situation, we're setting it for 15.82. That's a realistic voltage for a 16 volt battery. When we achieve fully charged, and the last couple amps take the longest to get there, because now we're stacking electrons just gradually. When the battery is fully charged, it's not presenting any load to the alternator, and the alternator is sitting there free spinning, and it's cooling itself completely off. So when it is presented with a load, the alternator is at its full resting cool temperature. It's not hot, unlike in a lead acid system where there's a load constantly present. Constantly present. Lead acid chemistry lends itself to the point where you got to push it over 2 volts. Lithium technology, where you set the battery's resting voltage with your alternator, is where it's going to be charged to. You'll come out the next morning, turn your key on, the voltage is going to be the same thing unless there's a parasitic draw depleting the battery overnight. So we went from pulling 89 amps down to 7 amps, and we got 0.2 of a volt to go. You can totally charge a lithium battery off your stock electrical system in your vehicle, but it's only going to charge it at like 14.2, 14.5 volts. And that's when you get to go learn about external voltage regulators, external voltage rectifiers, if you want to go past that 14.5. Or having a third, what they call the 3-wire setup on your alternator, where you've got an external voltage regulator and a MOSFET that controls the switching of the. So we're pushing 4.6 amps in to get 1 more tenth of a volt over here, which this might click up. But once we eventually get to fully charged, this drops to 0, presenting 0 electrical load to your system in your vehicle. 0. Remember, only charging to 14.2, this battery is totally capable of doing 16 volts and maintaining 16 volts. Like I said, that last tenth of a volt is going to take a minute. This is the time when I normally shut the lights off. I'll go have dinner or give it a couple hours for the thing to just sit here. And what's happening is each one of the cells, because none of these have ever been charged, we're at 1.1 amps now. All the cells are balancing themselves out slowly. Like, you got to think of each one of these as like water tanks, and there's a little bit of air bubbles in each one of the tanks. And we're just slowly cycling water through the tanks, and the air bubbles are and we're filling up to our maximum. This takes a long, protracted amount of time, but eventually this will drop down to like 0.2 of a volt or 0.2 of an amp. And that means the battery is at its fullest potential that it can be. And we got to do this with every single new battery that we get. Just give it time. It takes a little bit of time the first charge, but then after that it is rock and roll, mama, daddy, let's go. So we'll go ahead, we'll cut the mic off again. We'll jump into some fast forwarding time frame here, and we'll see what happens. This meter gets a little flaky underneath an amp. We're at 0.4 of an amp. We're at 15.83. So 15.82. It takes a while, doesn't it? But it's charged. And now it can dump out 900 to 1,000 amps worth of draw, like that. Of course, the laws of thermodynamics and Ohm's law and yibbity schmibbity being what they are, if you pull a 1,000 amp load on this, you're going to have to replace the 1,000 amp load with a little bit of charge over time, right? But the amount of storage that's in this bank is breathtaking. Let's see where we sit tomorrow morning. We'll let this sit here and just do nothing for the next 10 hours. Well, good morning. It's actually like noon my time. So these sat all night long. We charged to 15.82. See, where'd we end up? 15.6. So we lost 0.2 of a volt in roughly 14 hours. And it's not too bad. Well, this battery bank is for a friend of mine. And we're building this for Bullet Bob. This is gonna go in his new ride around truck, other than his Escalade. So, on that note, we're gonna wait for the next steps. But I'm gonna release this as his own individual YouTube video, where we talk about charging and show charging and that kind of thing. So you guys are watching that. If not, stay tuned. If this is in a later video, stay tuned and we'll show you the rest of the beautiful construction for this little battery. So, gentlemen, we'll see you. Click, click. With my dog, he's giving me loves. Hey, buddy. Hi. I got to explain to the people on YouTube what I'm doing here so I can keep working. But that means I'm going to take a break and play with it. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Okay. So what we got here is fresh off the hop from the plastic cutting company. Now I found out that I can have this stuff cut for like 35 bucks. It's a finished edge, crystal clear, and this is pieces of Lexan. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves a battery case. So let me grab the battery over here real quick. So this will slide inside of this, and just barely. We want to create the smallest footprint battery case that we can. Okay. Now off of this, we're going to have this piece of copper, which we're going to pass a tremendous amount of current through in its future state. And we're going to attach this to the side. So this is one side. It's the other side. There's our top, which we're going to leave accessible, and then the bottom piece, which is here. Okay? And on this piece, we're going to attach somewhere here in the middle. I'm going to split this copper bar in half, and we're going to get our holes that we're drilling into the plastic done first. Okay? So I got to split this thing in half. Of course, I'm going to clean it up, make it all shiny and pretty. And then we're going to make it so that we have a piece of like 4/0 gauge that comes off the battery terminal and down to this distribution plate. Somewhere in the middle, or out here on the end. And then in here, we're going to put probably 3 attachment points and 3 attachment points for other accessories that he can bolt to the side of this thing, i.e. his amps, his battery feeds, all that kind of stuff. So once I get this plate cut in half, pre-drilled and mocked up, then I'll be able to drill the holes into this Lexan for the mounting. And then that is way torqued out. That's interesting. to look into why that is so spread out. A little bit of a gap going on here. So we'll figure that out here in a minute. Needless to say, I've got drilling and polishing and sanding and all kinds of stuff. I want to be very careful that we don't scratch or mar this up. These are our two end plates. We'll glue this all together. We'll give it about 24 hours of cure time. And we got to make sure that we have every joint sealed, because we're going to fill this up with 2-part epoxy, and that's actually what holds this whole thing together. So let me measure this plate. We'll cut her in half on the bandsaw. We're going to get it polished out, and we're going to get all our pilot holes drilled. Well, this is always the trickiest bit of the game here. I wish I would have done this with mine. I mean, every corner on this is just cut with laser precision, and it's sanded and clear. This is going to come out looking so sweet for Bob. So anyhow, we started on this side, and we glued this in so it's square, and then we laid this side panel on, and we glued it and then glued it, and then we shoot that with some Senelic activation. They use a solvent glue that they claim is stronger. I don't really care. I need to have a sealed joint for me to be able to fill this up with 2-part epoxy. So the last bit is to glue this side on, and then we're going to let it sit overnight and let all the glue cure on all the joints. And literally it's going to have to sit for quite a few hours, because the glue just seeps in and it gets into every little thing, and if I touch it and leave a fingerprint on anything, my guy's going to be stuck looking at this until the end of time. So, and then I'll probably come out in a couple more hours and I'll lay a secondary bead over all of these joints after all the activator is dried off, and that'll seep in and that'll fill up all the other joints. But we got this piece finished, and I just went to go buy the hardware for this. Yeah, we're gonna do it like so. So this will mount, this will be the primary mounting hole for the lead coming off the battery. And that'll mount something like that. And then that'll mount something like so. I'm a little torn on what I want to do yet, because I know that I got to put an impact guard over the top of this. Sorry. That'll mount like this, that'll mount like that. I know I got to put an impact guard over the top of this. I figure I'll do that with some all threads, some nuts. It's going to be really kind of trick how I do this. But it's going to have a fully removable top, which is this piece, which will be held in place with all thread that is suspended in the 2-part epoxy in between the cells. So he'll have access to the total top portion of this thing if he needs it. And yeah, it's just the gluing of this is like freaking delicate, and trying to keep my fingers super glue clean and Senelic glue free is the hardest bit. Really is. Okay, so I'm not having to jump around the camera. I'm going to glue this onto here. Be right back. That is going to look so sick. So I've re-glued everything, and now I just got to let the activator do its bit and seal everything up. Wow, this looks good. I think Bob's going to be very happy with this. Okay, the trick is don't touch it now. Don't touch it. No touch. I'm one of them guys. Say no touch, gotta touch. Yeah, I'll polish these all up, and they're gonna look really sick. Hanging here off the side. A big piece of like 4/0 gauge coming down to here, bolted up. That's gonna look sick. So then he can bring his 2 battery leads up and attach them here on the outside corners, and then he can hook all his amps and all his accessories and stuff up here to the top. These are the supporting holes. So once this all dries and the cure material, the activator material, evaporates off everything, because I don't want to go in here and wipe this with a rag right now. Wipe it with a rag tomorrow. I'm going to put screws through here to hold on to these plates and support the plates. But then the plates are going to be pressured against this plastic, right? So like there's going to be a screw and a nut with long threads on it. And then I'll take and I'll mount all the hardware up on here with star washers on the back of the nuts. And then everything is going to be held with pressure to the plastic. So when he goes to thread his screws on, the star washers will grab onto the, or put his nuts on to thread on the hardware. The bolts in the back are going to have star washers on them. So it'll grab. That's why there's 4 of these to help spread the torque load and everything, spread it out. But this is made of Lexan. This isn't made of plexiglass. The reason I like Lexan is because it's soft. I built mine out of 1/2-inch Lexan. This is not that. This is, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5/8. So just a little bit thinner than 1/2-inch. Plastics are getting hard to get. Everything's getting hard to get. It's only going to get worse, you guys. So I don't know. I'm just doing this one, and you guys are going to see how it's done, and you guys can make your own up if you want. This is a custom thing for a friend of mine that I know that he's really going to appreciate it. So yeah, I pulled the backer off of this, and I'm tripping because I did that. And this is actually a seamless edge here. That's how clear the finish edge on this is. It looks like there's a little gap here, but there's not. Same thing's going on here. It's perfect. I'm excited. This looks really good. And if it's not, you know, it's just Synelix, so it's not like I can't get in there and just break it and start over. What really holds this together is the 2-part epoxy. So, okay, we're done with this for now. In this minute, I'm going to set it aside. No touch. No touch. No touch. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. How this is all going to work is I'll bring a wire probably from this post down to this lug, and then another wire from this post down to this lug. And then he can go ahead and attach all his other stuff onto here, all his other amps and electrical, whatever. I don't care. I'm just saying. This will fit on here, and it'll sit down flush with the edge of this. And then I'll have 2 nylock nuts that are like here on the front. That'll stop the wing nuts from coming down. These nylocks are set here. I'm going to have another piece of plexiglass, or not plexiglass, but Lexan on the front that'll fit here as an impact guard. And then it'll have a cap that comes across the top that's clear, so he can run all his power wires in from the side and the bottoms and whatnot. I poured this at about 10 o'clock this evening. That's starting to get really solid, and so's that. But this is my most favorite part of the whole deal. Oh. This is just straight up sexy. Oh, that is so good. Crystal clear, bullet resistant Lexan, clear case, or otherwise polycarbonate clear case. It's not ready for me to move it, but this is crystal clear epoxy that we put in here. Crystal clear countertop epoxy. So when this does finish setting up tomorrow, this is going to look really cool. This is a better version than the one that I have in my own personal rig. I'm thinking about selling the one on my personal rig and building myself a 4-pack. 1-pack, 2-pack. So this is one battery, this is one battery. I want to build a 4-pack for myself. I don't really need it, but more is always better, right? Oh, I can't wait to finish this. That thing's gonna look slick when it's done. Well, I used epoxy from Home Depot, and I think I'm gonna be waiting on that for a little while for it to get set up. It's like half of the epoxy is set up and then the other half is not. Half of the epoxy is crystal clear and the other half is cloudy. I don't know. I don't know. We're gonna move on. So my day has been crap, by the way. My drill burned up. I freaking had a little tiny wire brush in my drill, and it popped out of the chuck and almost impaled me in my eyeball. I'm fine, don't worry. I'm having one of them days. I spent most of my morning running around trying to acquire 4/0 gauge cable, which normally I keep a huge stock of that, but I went to reach back on the shelf to grab that 4/0, and guess what? No 4/0. So, in wanting to move forward here, after ordering more 4/0 online, I went ahead and thought I'd go over to a couple of the welding companies here in town, and there's exactly 420 something foot of this cable in my town. I mean, I could go to like Platt or something like that, or Granger, but they're going to have commercial gauge wire. They're not going to have stranded welding lead that's soft. I called Bob today. I said, man, you're not a cheap date, buddy. Hope you know that. I paid a lot of money. It's like each one of these eyelets here are about $16 a piece, just for the eyelets. Now, for those of you that are going to be watching this video and you're like, what in the hell is he doing? We solder our eyelets here. Now, if you are in the car audio world or the solar system world, right now you're going, what? No! They all claim that this is bad. It causes vibration damage and the wire can get damaged and that kind of thing. Well, me, and one of my close friends, we did a study of this. And all we're talking about is the end of the eyelet. We're going to fill it with solder. We're not doing full submersion of the eyelet and then letting it wick back up the leads. We've done dual hydraulic crimp, which is cold welded. This eyelet's never going to come apart, nor is none of this. It's all cold welded. But we have found that there's like a 15 to 20% difference in electrical resistance versus just a mechanical cold weld, otherwise a shitty connection. This versus we're going to do solder and we're going to have a physical connection. Allow the electrical pixies to move back and forth a little bit easier. Now this does have a tendency to splatter quite a bit. So I have new tools today. I'm excited about this. As I was at the welding shop, I look over and they've got these cutesy little arm gauntlets. I'm like, what? Well, I don't know about you. I've had hot lead fling on my arm before. And this is for like TIG welding. I don't like having hot lead on my soft, fleshy bit. I just don't. Call me a coward. But for 20 bucks, I'll protect my forearm. It's like a condom for my arm. I don't want to fuck up my tattoo. All right, let's get after this. That's the difference between winning and losing right here, as far as I'm concerned. This makes this eyelet almost indestructible. I set up my very first big mobile with a 32 pill in it. And I remember I was out talking Skip, and I was out there talking for a while, like a few hours. And I crawl in the back of the truck to shut everything down. This one needs more flux. Shut everything down, and I noticed that several of my eyelets are very hot, like scorching red hot. I'm like, what in the shit is this all about? And it was a bad joint, just bad joints, right? So I came back to the house, took all the eyelets apart, redid them, and then soldered the joints and put it all back together. And man, I picked up more power, and it did more watts, and the eyelets are ice cold. Same amount of everything. I was like, well, hell. But then we went on and we did a study later on amongst ourselves on what we needed to do to make the best eyelet that we could. So the hydraulic crimping is one thing, but letting that upper tip pocket be full of solder, man, that just takes the motion lotion and lets it slide from hole to hole. I'm telling you, the Magic Pixies love this. They flow around on the inside of this eyelet with little to no resistance. And if you do it properly, the solder can't migrate up past this second crimp, or even past the crimp. So there's no vibration damage. Now, what we also do is, those of you that watch my videos all the time, you know what I'm going to say next. We put heat shrink, marine grade heat shrink, on the eyelet. Why do we do that? Well, one, to keep moisture out of the eyelet, and two, to help support the eyelet's connection. Even if you crimp this and don't solder, the point where the rubber meets the eyelet is the weakest joint. I mean, it's just weak. So anything that we can do to help support that the joint, we do. It just comes out looking like chrome glass. Here and here is a weak, just mechanically weak. So we want to minimize the amount of vibration that we have going on here in this joint. So we'll put heat shrink over this, marine grade heat shrink, that is. See, it's still cooking in here. It's still bubbling. But this should not leak. And that is about the best that money can buy as far as a connection goes. I don't know what's going on here. The epoxy doesn't want to set. This is still relatively liquid, but the rest of this is as solid as a brick. And I mean, I mixed this with a paint mixer, so I don't know. Just have to watch it and see what happens. Well, I feel like the world's trying to not let me do this as far as like karma or something. I don't know. This is being a real pill, this particular battery. But the reason that I have to do it like this is not because it looks cool. This is 100% a functionality thing. I got to reiterate to you guys that these post fittings on here, on top of these batteries, they're made of aluminum, and you can strip these just by looking at them funny. So we don't want to be tightening these down or undoing them a bunch and retightening them a bunch. We don't want to do that. We want to set them and forget them, and then make another access point for us to attach to the battery, period. Okay? That's what these plates are for. And the point behind the plates is that you can run an impact on the plates, you know, a vibrational impact tool like a Ryobi impact wrench. And we don't have to worry about over torquing these little tiny aluminum threads that are up here. Like this. I watched a guy on Facebook about 6 months ago, and he was assembling one of these LTOs, and he was assembling it with an impact like this, and he was slamming the end of the cells on with the impact wrench. And then 2 weeks later, he's crying to everybody that had an ear to listen about how the cells have all burst and that these batteries are junk. And he was blaming everybody but himself. And I didn't have the heart to say anything. I just kept my mouth shut. You can run your impact driver on these plates. On the back of these plates, there's little star washers like this. So how the plate is assembled is bolt, star washer, through the plate, washer, there you go, washer, and then captive nut. Okay, so when this starts to torque down, because we can't get a wrench back here, I mean, I guess we could put a slim open end box wrench back there, it bites into this lock washer and it keeps it from spinning. That and then the pressure against the Lexan. But we can attach anything we want now to any of these posts. Like he could have his battery come and attach, the electrical system from the truck come and attach on these posts. Everything is now, this is, you know, auxiliaries for his smaller wires. He's got all of his heavy aught gauge terminals. These plates are going to be able to carry more current than he's ever going to be able to draw. That makes sense? And this 4-aught cable represents almost no electrical loss from A to B. Now I know that those eyelets that I just put on here, there was nothing for scale, right? Well, let's go down here and let's look at this. That is a 4-aught eyelet, which is actually the right eyelet for the job. This is a 2-aught eyelet, and this is a 1-aught eyelet. You see the difference? This is something that you can't cut corners on. $18 a piece, $3 or $4 a piece, $1 or $2 a piece. I have no idea why those are so freaking expensive. I think it's just because it's a supply and demand thing. Well, let's put this other side together, and we're going to get the top plate drilled out, because these posts are relatively stiff. These are as solid as a rock. This is a piece of all thread with a captive nut. So I've got a captive nut, then I've got myself a washer, and then a rubber gasket, and then it comes through the Lexan. Then we've got yet another washer and another captive nut. So none of this will jiggle apart. Like I said, there's going to be an impact plate that we're going to put on here that's made from 1/2 inch thick Lexan that is the same dimensional size as this case. Of course, it's going to sit back something along this area. So we're going to lose probably another 1.5 inches worth of space. But still, all in all, this is way smaller than anything that you could ever do with lead acid. That's literally all I have left to do at this point, is wait for this sloppy, snotty 2-part epoxy to frickin' harden, which might take a couple days, and get these 2 plates done. So, less talking, more do. Oh, remember a couple segments ago where I was talking about how the cells were bowed down here on the negative? What it was the heat shrink, the marine grade heat shrink that I put on here was so thick that when I went to tighten down the posts, it was literally taking the battery cells and making them go. So I just got rid of that heat shrink. I put tape on here because we've got to have a visual marker of what's positive, what's negative. And problem went away. Okay. One more nut to go, one more washer to go, and we're done with this thing, finally. Finally. So let's tighten this down. Remember, no more than 17 inch-pounds. There we go. We'll bring this around, we'll put it on the positive distribution bus plate, put on our washer. We're going to start our nylock because I don't want this to come off ever. Square this up in the distribution bus. Lovely, right? Perfect. Just perfect. I want to call it a super flux capacitor. This thing just looks cool. At least it came out exactly how I envisioned it in my head. The downside to this whole thing is the epoxy that's in here. I've got a couple air bubbles and inclusions in it that I don't personally feel comfortable with, and then the whole top portion of this getting bubbles in it. Nah. But we'll see what happens when in a couple days this decides it's going to set up. I literally got in here with a paint beater and mixed this epoxy before I set the battery in it. And I don't know why. It's half of it's hard, the other half is not. So we'll see, maybe in a couple days. I mean, if this was a countertop resin, I'd sit here and hit it with a torch. But then the shrink wrap that's on the cells would all burst. So just gotta wait, keep it warm, and we'll wait. Make a box, they said. Make it clear, they said. Make it perfectly square, they said. And make it so I can hook up 35 amplifiers to it, they said. Gentlemen, my name is BBI, and this is the last one of these I'm ever going to build. I think I've done enough YouTube videos explaining to everybody how to do this themselves, and this particular battery took days to make. But it gives me ideas on what I want to do for my next one. Not that I really need one, but it gives me ideas on what I want to do for my next one. Big shout out to Siglent. Big shout out to Mexman. Big shout out to all of you guys. A little bit of love for my buddy Sean over there at Excess Power. Thanks, bro, for the help on this. And as always, thanks to my Patreons. I'll see you. Bye.